So, human trafficking can be defined as any crime relating to the recruitment/employment of people through means of deception, force, fraud, or anything related. It's a modern day issue which shares a lot of similarities to slavery back in the 1800s. Human trafficking can often be seen as a gendered crime. This means that women are more likely to be trafficked and forced into the sex trade/prostitution, and men are more likely to be trafficked into forced labor. Any person can be a victim of trafficking, but traffickers won't just go for anyone out in the streets. People who usually fall victim to trafficking are financially struggling and are desperate for work. For examples, street beggars, gullible people who believe traffickers' lives of protection, jobs, a better life, or immigrants who fled their countries. Traffickers and victims can share ethnic, cultural, and national backgrounds, which allow traffickers to better understand how to trap their victims. Traffickers can also have some sort of relation to the victim, like being a neighbor, friend, or even a family member. Different types of major trafficking include forced labor, where employers exploit workers. These workers often receive little to no pay. Almost all forms of labor can be subjected to trafficking. Some examples where you see this are in factories, restaurants, and construction sites. Involuntary domestic servitude, where a person is forced to work within a household environment. They are unable to leave and are usually never paid. Sexual and physical abuse can also occur. Sex trafficking, when a person is deceived, forced, or coerced into participating in sexual acts. This can occur in different forms such as prostitution, sex tourism, escort agencies, or phone sex lines. Other sub-forms of trafficking include forced marriages, non-consensual organ transplants/donations, or petty crimes such as stealing or begging. Some examples in ways that traffickers hold their victims are threatening the victim's close/loved ones if they don't continue serving the trafficker. This often puts the victim in a situation where staying put is better, rather than getting their close family involved and possibly harmed. Fraud or blackmail. The trafficker obtains info that the victim doesn't want to be revealed and uses it against them. Or the trafficker convinces the victim that their family wants/needs them to continue their stay with them. The victim can also be forced into taking/using drugs in order to distract them from the situation. Contract substitution, where the trafficker provides a contract that is purposely vague or later changes the terms or even can have it so that the contract is not in the victim's native language, to where they are provided with poor or even incorrect translations. Foreign country problems if the victim was trafficked across borders, since the trafficker usually provides them with fake documents and papers in order to strip them of their identity, preventing them from leaving the country they were trafficked to. This could lead to the victim being unable to get around in the new land they may find themselves in, since they don't know the language and cannot get around. So staying in captivity seems like the better option. Money issues come when the victim is unable to support themselves financially, even if they did manage to escape their trafficking. This is because they are usually making little to no money during their trafficking. This can leave them stuck with their trafficker, who usually manipulates them into staying because of a debt they need to pay, saying that once it's paid, they will be released. But in reality, the debt will never be paid, since the victim cannot pay it because of the circumstances they are in. In summation, traffickers try to establish a feeling of fake trust between them and the victim, to where the victim must depend on the trafficker. Fake promises and lies are used to impose control. Victims usually find themselves physically and mentally scarred. Possible physical damage can include exhaustion, headaches, fatigue, extreme heat/cold related problems, sexual and reproductive health problems, respiratory problems, injuries and illnesses because of poor working environments. Victims suffering intensive labor trafficking don't work in the greatest conditions, from conditions like poor ventilation and sanitation, extended hours, repetitive motion activities, poor training and use of heavy or high-risk equipment, and chemical hazards and lack of protective equipment. Possible mental damage can include mental illnesses such as depression, PTSD, and anxiety disorders. They can experience suicidal thoughts, become addicted to drugs or alcohol because of the trafficker giving it to them as a way of coping, or they could end up with developmental issues. Though this only applies to children who are taken away from their families and thus could not experience a normal family life and establish relationships. Some statistics on human trafficking are that there are an estimated 40.3 million victims of trafficking worldwide. It's an estimated industry that makes $32 billion each year, making it the second largest international crime industry behind illegal drug trafficking. Out of the $32 billion, $15.5 billion is made in industrialized countries. It's estimated that at least 80% of trafficking involves sexual exploitation and 19% involves labor exploitation, with the 1% being other types of exploitation. 50% of victims are usually underage, between ages 12 and 14, and 80% of them are girls. Between 600,000 and 800,000 people are trafficked across borders each year. Some of the worst offenders of human trafficking include countries like North Korea, Russia, Iran, and China. Russia and Korea in particular, the U.S. Congress approved sanctions against Russian banks and oil companies, and also targets North Korean labor in places like Russia. Russia also recently expanded agreements with North Korea that allow for labor camps and slave-like conditions for workers within Russian borders. About 20,000 workers from North Korea are sent to Russia each year. In China, the government has been called out for holes in their state laws that were supposed to be stopping human trafficking and ongoing state-sponsored labor, despite announcements saying that the practices have been stopped. China's one-child policy has also been cited as some causes for men in China to find wives through sex trafficking. Iran's government has continually wrongfully punished human trafficking victims because of acts that they were forced to do, such as adultery, prostitution, and illegal immigration. Some were even executed. Children as young as 3 have also been confirmed human trafficking victims, forced to beg on the streets under the threat of physical abuse. Escaped victims find themselves in tough situations. Examples of this is a person has just managed to escape their traffickers, but they are usually alone, scared, have nothing, and if in a foreign country, nowhere to go and nobody to go to. Support groups that are made to help victims recover from trafficking don't provide enough support for victims, and there are not many of these groups around, so help is usually limited. Victims internationally can be mistaken as illegal immigrants and can be arrested. Thus, victims won't go to authorities for help. Victims can find themselves stigmatized by normal people, thus making it hard to speak out about their situations and look for better jobs in order to spread awareness and reintegrate back into society.